Whether you're hitting the road or kicking back in the cab, it's time to take a load off with Big Rig Banter. Powered by AllTruckJobs.com, your source for finding the trucking jobs drivers really want. Get ready to shift into gear and let the conversations roll.
Hello and welcome to the 5th episode of Big Rig Banter, a show about all things commercial driving and transportation related. I'm your co-host, Connor Smith.
And I'm Troy Diffenderfer.
The date is July 5th, 2017, and we've got a great show in store for you guys today. We're going to be talking about one of the single most pressing industry issues facing both drivers and trucking companies. That, my friends, is the driver shortage.
Yeah, and as a wide-reaching industry issue, we're going to bring you the facts about the driver shortage's impact, context, and hopefully some solutions.
That's right, and we've been fortunate enough to interview Director of Safety and Recruiting Lee Kuhn of Terminal Transport to get an industry perspective, so that's coming up later in the episode.
But before we get into all that, let's start with some of the latest news from the commercial driving world. All right, our first story takes us to Russia, where a trucking company called Traft has just unveiled what they are calling a transformative strategy when it comes to reinventing logistics for the dawn of autonomous commercial vehicles. The company said it's looking to replace 20% of its fleet with autonomous vehicles this year alone, with plans to double that in 2018. Considering that this company is moving so quickly to upgrade its fleet, many are concerned that the drivers will be left behind. However, Traft is already creating a government-approved union to oversee extensive retraining programs, and this is going to hopefully ensure the rights of drivers in the future. If you've been following the progression of autonomous vehicles, you'll know the main concern is putting drivers out of work. So perhaps this could serve as a model for how other countries, especially the U.S., could consider softening the blow of self-driving trucks and so on.
Absolutely, yeah. It's that's going to be definitely one of the challenges facing the industry in the future is, having the rights of actual truckers be respected and be honored as these vehicles, emerge onto the scene. And
keeping them employed.
Right. Or, retrained or whatever it's going to take to help current drivers, flex with the industry as it's changing. So it's going to be cool to see how this company handles this upgrade of their fleet, and maybe it can be used as a model for other places, other countries around the world, as it's almost inevitable they will also be experiencing the autonomous truck revolution.
Hopefully, yeah.
All right, and so on to our next story. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, that's the OOIDA, who have been leading the fight against the MAP 21 electronic logging device rule, had their appeal rejected by the Supreme Court. Essentially, this rule calls for the Secretary of Transportation to adopt the proper regulations requiring ELD use in commercial vehicles driving interstate, something that must be accomplished by December 18th of this year. This has had many drivers and companies up in arms, feeling it was unnecessary and actually invasive to require these devices be installed. In a sense, people feel like it's a form of surveillance. It's tracking your truck's every move. It's mapping out your routes for you. It's recording all of the crucial details that, logistics companies like to see and trucking companies want to know, yet it is doing away with the paper logs, so there's a lot of resistance there, and it is going to be costly, to get all these devices in these trucks as well. So since the OOIDA's appeal had been rejected, it seems that the rule will remain in place until the December deadline. And actually, as an interesting twist, commercial vehicles made prior to the year 2000 are actually exempt from this rule, making it kind of a race to find these vehicles for many who wish to avoid fitting their fleets with ELDs. And we know that many people are upset about this, and there's very strong opinions on either side advocating for and against this technology. So we actually have a blog on AllTruckJobs.com discussing some of the potential benefits to using ELDs and why it may not be the worst thing for the industry, and we'd love your input on it. If you can go check that blog out, the link will be below. But it seems that, we're just going to have to go forward with the Supreme Court's decision at this point and see where the road takes us, I guess.
All right, and speaking of more future technology, you may think it's pointless to reinvent the wheel, but that is in fact what Michelin is attempting to do with their newest concept called Vision. Looking like an alien sand dollar lined with black rubber, the tire is supposed to be, quote, inspired by nature with a light, efficient structure, end quote, according to Terry Geddes, Michelin's Executive Vice President of Research and Development. And it's crafted using a wide variety of materials, including bamboo, paper, molasses, tin cans, wood, electronic waste, plastic waste, hay, tire chips, used metal, cloth, cardboard, orange zest, and a natural rubber.
That doesn't sound like a tire at all.
Yeah, it sounds like some strange concoction. But the tire is created actually using 3D printers to allow optimized tread and can be adapted to the user's needs, which should allow people to drive in various weather conditions without having to kind of modify your tires already, which is definitely a benefit. But perhaps one of the most interesting aspects of Vision is that it's airless, meaning it can neither explode or blow out. It is also expected that the tire will have sensors to provide real-time information about its conditions, which is also a major benefit. We'll be sure to post pictures of this crazy-looking tire on our Facebook page so you can check that out at your leisure. We'll be right back with our main topic after this quick break.
Wherever the job takes you, Big Rig Banter is here to bring you the latest in industry topics, trends, and more. Stay tuned after this short break.
All right, welcome back, and now it is time for the main topic of the day. Our show is entitled Fixing the Driver Shortage for the Long Haul. So to start, over the past 15 years, the trucking industry has periodically struggled with a shortage of truck drivers. The first shortage was actually documented in a 2005 report by the American Trucking Association. Back then, the shortage was roughly 20,000 drivers. Then, after the last recession in 2008, the shortage was eliminated as industry volumes plummeted, so that's still not good. But it wasn't until actually 2011 that industry volumes began to recover, and thus the shortage returned. The driver market continued to tighten, and the shortage skyrocketed to 38,000 by 2014. And according to this same report, the driver shortage is projected to reach 100,000 drivers this year alone. The report also comments on the fact that the truck driver shortage probably seems much worse to motor carriers than current figures suggest, because quality over quantity is really the issue. Many carriers have strict hiring criteria based on things like driving history, experience, and many other factors. And as a result, receiving applications for employment means motor carriers are finding fewer eligible candidates, which is quite the issue.
Yeah, and when we get into our interview with Lee Kuhn, he's going to talk to us about his kind of application process and how he kind of wades through the various applications he gets to find the best truckers. And he also reiterates that it often isn't a quantity problem, but it is a quality problem.
So we're going to start with some of the misconceptions and issues that are really at the center of this shortage. So again, one of the most prevalent misconceptions is that there aren't enough actual drivers to fill all the positions available, when really it's that many companies just struggle with finding qualified employees. One thing we learned that makes hiring good drivers difficult is seeing them jump from one employer to the next. This is just something that really raises some suspicions as to how committed someone is to the job, even if that is somewhat of an unfair assumption.
Additionally, there may be some issues with the companies lacking the educational resources to help train these drivers to their standards, so they are forced to only hire the top professionals who are increasingly scarce.
That's right, and so now we're going to hear from Lee Kuhn of Terminal Transport. He's the Director of Safety and Recruiting, and so he's going to tell us some things about how Terminal deals with the driver shortage and some other cool things about the company. Here's that interview. All right, so we are talking with Lee Kuhn. He's a Director of Safety and Recruiting at Terminal Transport Incorporated. Lee, thanks for coming on the program.
Sure.
So we're going to jump right in here. Our first question, so you previously talked about the driver shortage, but more specifically you explained this is a, quote, good driver shortage. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I don't believe that there is a driver shortage in a black and white world, because we don't have a lack of drivers at all. We have a lack of good drivers. Mm-hmm. And that means guys that are drivers that have done something to wreck their they're driving their MVR, and meaning that they're getting a lot of tickets, or they're maybe getting their CSA score, their PSP reports and things like that. Right. They've done things to kind of sabotage themselves. Okay. And so the PSP world, which is what I call the driver's personal PSP report, and that records everything that happens at a roadside, good or bad. And those bad things certainly get weighed into a hiring decision when drivers are brought in. So if you have a driver that has a multitude of hours of service issues and tickets or warnings or whatever, then it becomes an issue because you don't want to put him in your truck, because if he gets caught doing that, then that goes on the company's CSA score. So that's where that personal PSP report is so vital. And that kind of goes into the next part, and that is that when the drivers start to do job hopping, that becomes all these things get weighed into the hiring decision.
Right.
And so when drivers don't even realize, I guess, that they're doing it to themselves, but it certainly is become a problem within the industry. And therefore is the reason why I call it a good driver shortage and not just a driver shortage.
And how do I know you see these underqualified drivers or drivers that may have issues. Do you think it's because of a lack of schooling, or do you think it's a generational thing? And kind of, has this grown? Has this always been an issue, or has it kind of been just the last few maybe decades that it's been a problem?
Well, there's certainly the generational things, and that certainly weighs into it. And we live in a society that inundates us with instants, and everything is done instantly. We Definitely. Have drive-through foods. We have everything is instant. We do all of our online banking. We are connected to the world through our cell phones, and so I think that weighs into it when you get into the younger generations, and I think that they don't see. And I think that it is a part of the education process, is explaining to these drivers the impact that bad driving habits have on their PSP report and their MVR. So I do think it's a lack of training on the part of carriers in general, myself included, of not explaining to these drivers that how important it is to keep your record clean, that has such a huge bearing on a driver's earning potential, on his his hireability. That's the word I want.
Great. So on that same kind of note, it being a generational thing, do you think that the driving age should be lowered? And if it were to be, what possible downsides do you think would come as a result, if any?
Right, and that more or less goes over to the insurance industry, and which dictates that in a lot of cases, a company can only hire someone that is 23 years old or older. The FMCSA also dictates that the driver has to be 21 years old to drive interstate. They are allowed to drive intrastate. Before that, from the age of 18 to 21, once they're 21, they're allowed to go interstate. And that's counterproductive with what we're trying to do, because these kids get out of high school and they want that instant gratification or that instant solution to their needs, being, a career. And what happens is they can't get their foot in the door because they're bogged down with these regulations that they have to wait until they're 21, and then the insurance industry comes back and says 23. I understand where the insurance companies come from, and that is because generally speaking, your high risk drivers are that 18 to 26 age or whatever. And so they don't like us hiring those drivers, and that's the reason they make the 23-year-old. That criteria has to be met. As far as the FMCSA goes, I'm not sure what drives that 21 age, because what these kids get out of school, high school, they go and get a job flipping burgers or whatever. Mm-hmm. They're not going to do that in an instant society. They're not going to wait for 3 years until they can go start driving a truck. And in that 3 years, they end up meeting someone, and now they get married, and maybe now they have a child. So now they've established their life, and then it becomes a question of, do they want to jump in a truck and be gone for 2 weeks at a time, driving an over-the-road situation? And the answer is no. Neither the driver nor his their new spouse wants to go down that road and be gone away from home. So that now you've got this younger generation that basically doesn't have the opportunity to do it right out of high school, because it's really a lifestyle. The whole truck driving thing is a lifestyle, and if you don't get them young, at 18 years old, you're not. It's really hard to recruit them and to convince them that they can make a career out of this.
Do you feel like we'd see an uptick in trucking accidents, though, if we would lower that age? Like personally, have you seen, do trucking accidents tend to be with younger drivers, or is it kind of more of a myth or kind of across the board?
The problem with trucking accidents is probably the older generations, and it's the guys that have been driving 20 and 30 years, and they get complacent because they've driven this road, 5,000 times in their career, and they know this road like the back of their hand. So the complacency sets in, and then all of a sudden they make a mistake, and it becomes, a tragedy possibly. So that's where I feel that most of the accidents are going. With the young drivers, the beauty of being able to hire an 18-year-old driver is he's fresh and he's hungry, and it's an opportunity for the trucking industry to actually teach this guy and mold him without the bad habits. And look, we've taken the trucks, we've put governors on them, we've given them automatic transmissions, we've put cameras in the trucks, we have braking systems. There's all kinds of safety features that are built into these trucks now. And I think it's advantageous for those younger drivers that come in that they are going to be safe. And if we can train them when they're young like that, they're going to become a much better professional driver.
Great, yeah. So do you think with these younger drivers coming in and everything, and trying to maybe target, millennial drivers and people that age 18 and on group, do you think social media and other media is affecting the way that people perceive trucking, and how much do you use social media in recruiting drivers and things like that?
Very much so. It's all about that. The days of billboards and putting an ad in the local farm newspaper for drivers and having 20 applicants on your front door, those days are long gone.
Right.
And if a company's not using social media and not using the electronic age to their advantage, they are missing out tremendously on recruiting these good drivers, not just drivers in general, but good drivers. And if they continue to do that, they're going to be left out in the cold. So it's important to utilize that. I utilize it every day. And I use electronic formats, and I've had to teach myself how to use Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and I had to do it out of necessity because every driver is unique. Every driver is different, and some of them prefer to communicate that way as opposed to actually making a phone call. Others, you may still make that phone call and find yourself in a good. They're comfortable in that environment, but you have to open yourself up as a recruiter to actually use all those mediums to reach your niche market that you're trying to find, and that is the drivers, the qualified good drivers.
Couldn't agree more there.
And tell us more about the videos you make. I thought that was really interesting. I know over here at AllTruckJobs, we try and encourage some of our clients to use video, and I know you're kind of really into that, and you make videos for your fleet on various topics. So can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So what I do is I make videos, and I don't have a schedule that I do it on, but once in a while I'll find a topic that I can use, that I want to present to the drivers, and I can make I have the ability to make that video and then make it available to our drivers. And that can be on, just about anything. It could be safety. It could be maybe our health insurance program. It could be on a multitude of different topics. But it's a good way because every single driver on the road, no matter their age, carries a smartphone or some sort of electronic device in their trucks, and they have access to the internet and they can watch the videos, and that's a lot easier to deal with than trying to get a newsletter out to the drivers, because they just see that and it goes, or mom gets it in the mail at home and she pitches it in the garbage, and that's obviously not the message we want to be sending. So by doing it by video, again, it's going back to that media medium, and utilizing that for all of our drivers.
Very cool. And so just to kind of wrap things up here, you said in the past that you like to show your new hires your standards for drivers, and what are some ways that Terminal Transport is doing this?
Because right up front, at the beginning, right at the top sheet of their application is our criteria. I don't hire drivers that have had more than 3 jobs in the last 3 years, and I know that there's a lot of recruiters that cringe when they hear that. But I can't foresee why I would want to waste my time on a driver that's going to find something wrong with Terminal Transport 6 months from now, and now I'm filling in another empty seat. So by raising my standards, and that's only one example, and they see that right at the very top page of their application, and they sign off on all those things, and they're well aware of what the requirements are and what my expectations of them are as a driver before they even fill out their name and address. And so they do that, and then when I bring them in, I spend time with them during the orientation process, and it gets that foundation, and that gets that topic gets reinforced as we go along of how important that it is to we hold our drivers to a high standard, and there's an accountability process here. And I think that's been really good because I don't have the turnover that most trucking companies are dealing with.
Well, Lee, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us here. There's a lot of great information.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, no problem.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with us, and we'd love to have you on the show again. We know we'd always love your input, so I'll definitely keep in touch with you.
I will be available.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, I'll talk later. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, so a lot of great information there, and just another special thanks to Lee for taking the time to talk to us. He really hit on a lot of the key points there, and just what to look for in both employers and what to consider for your own personal driving, whether it's going to be your resume or just your career as a whole. And, the driver shortage is something that it's very far-reaching, and a lot of different people are affected.
Yeah, and while our interview with Lee kind of hit on the various issues that are plaguing the trucking shortage, let's kind of look towards the future and look at some of the solutions. And one of the first areas to look at for a solution is obviously at the beginning, and that's with the trucking school and the education process. Another way to work on the shortage would be to make the course more rigorous. It's important that the schooling process only promotes the best possible drivers. If a recruiter or trucking company has to sift through bad candidates, this is wasting time for both the employer and the employee. While many truckers fear that autonomous trucking will overrun the industry, this most likely is not the case. While autonomous trucks are on the horizon, we can expect a slow integration, with many companies opting not to adopt to the new technology at all. In fact, many trucking companies will value real drivers even more, so you shouldn't fret about autonomous trucks taking over. But then another part of the solution would be to look at which segments trucking recruiters are looking at. And there are two segments that are leading the way as new areas of exploration for a lot of trucking companies. And the first one is females. Currently, only about 6% of drivers are female, despite the fact that females make up 47% of all U.S. workers. This represents a major untapped market for a lot of trucking companies. And a major draw for women into the trucking world is the fact that they will make the same money as their peers as they get paid by the mile or the load of the percentage. And then a second population segment that these companies are aggressively targeting are millennials. It's no secret that the workforce is aging, so a lot of companies are looking towards millennials as their new hirees. With the average age of truck drivers trending up, new recruits need to be young. Better pay packages and benefits are one of the ways carriers are trying to woo millennials. And carriers are also updating technology within the cab, as millennials are generally accustomed to receiving information on demand. One of the big issues, however, is the fact that the current age requirements to drive a tractor-trailer across the interstate line is 21, and I know Lee alluded to that, and we are going to discuss it a little more later. And this eliminates eligible employees between the ages of 18 and 21 who will find work elsewhere. And then, last but not least, just to hit on it, you might want to look at recruiting military drivers. There is a recent article that we have on our blog that's talking about a proposed driver pilot program for former military, and that's proposed by the FMCSA. So I know a lot of military members have the same kind of qualities and features that many trucking recruiters are looking for, so that might be another demographic to look at. That many recruiters look for in truckers. A good solution would be to actively focus your recruiting initiatives on these demographics. Promoting your benefits and company culture is another perfect way to attract potential employees. You know, if these employees enjoy the company culture, it'll create a more loyal driver. So then, just to recap everything, you want to look at females, millennials, and military professionals, or a female millennial that's in the military.
There you go. That's the trucker of the future, right? And as always, you know, if your company is having trouble making the connection between quality drivers and the jobs you need filled, you can check out sites like ours, AllTruckJobs.com, and we can help keep your trucks filled and truckers happy.
All right, Connor. Well, now it's time to get to the fun topics, but first, let's take a short break.
Wherever the job takes you, Big Rig Banter is here to bring you the latest in industry topics, trends, and more. Stay tuned after this short break.
All right, and we are back, and we are ready for the fun topics. Connor and I are going to have a little debate here. We're going to talk about some of the regulations that are already in place for truckers. I know we discussed it with Lee Kuhn earlier, but I think it's worth taking a second look at, and Connor and I are going to pick maybe one regulation that we think either should be repealed or maybe at least needs a second look at. And I'm going to start and go with the driving age for trucking. I think Lee had a great point about how we should really look at rolling back the driving age, especially when it comes to interstate trucking. I think traveling across state lines, I think that responsibility can be handled by 18 or even 16-year-olds. And Lee talked about he doesn't see an uptick in crashes when it comes to younger drivers. He actually sees more crashes in the older generation of drivers that kind of become more complacent or maybe kind of become a little lax when it comes to safety precautions and the rules of the road. So I think as long as we can educate these young drivers, I think rolling back this would not be a problem. And it opens up a whole generation of future drivers, which I think is also good.
Absolutely. Yep, that's kind of tying it all together. And so for my regulation here that I would roll back, I think it would be the strict regulations on marijuana usage for drivers. Just considering that it's illegal on the federal level, so with the DOT's regulations, it essentially makes it difficult for drivers who are even legally prescribed medical marijuana to use it on the road. And, you know, it's much different than alcohol in the fact that it stays in your system for up to 30 days, even though you're completely sober otherwise. So really, it's kind of an unreasonable regulation to have to a certain extent when drivers are not even being impaired by the use, and yet they can lose their jobs just because they had a joint or two, you know, a month ago. It just doesn't really make that much sense. That's a little too harsh considering the offense, if you can even really call it that at times. And just to be clear, it is still not advised that you operate any heavy machinery or drive a truck while under the influence of marijuana. So we're not necessarily saying it should be legal to drive when you're high, but, with reasonable medical prescriptions, it shouldn't cost someone their job just because, they don't have a means of treating their condition otherwise, or that's the medicine that they've chosen or been prescribed by health professionals. So deserves a second look for sure.
Yeah, and we can see it across the country. It's become decriminalized in many states and cities, and we're kind of seeing these regulations begin to loosen up. And I think kind of at least taking a second look at it and maybe seeing if we can implement some of these changes into the trucking industry, I think is a great idea.
I guess it's just difficult, when people are driving across state lines and then they're crossing into different, jurisdictions and everything, and it doesn't necessarily translate from one state to the next. So it's more of a federal level issue, I guess, than even a statewide thing. But
well, yeah, these are two of the regulations that we think should be kind of either looked at or repealed, but we're sure that you have some ideas of your own of what regulations need to be changed or at least looked at. So tweet us at Big Rig Banter, or leave a comment below, or hit us up on Facebook. All right, now let's switch gears and talk about 4th of July. I know it was just yesterday that you guys were chilling and grilling and hanging out with the family, hopefully, but some of you truckers might not have had the chance to kind of experience the traditional 4th of July where you were able to relax, but we do want to talk about some of our favorite things, whether you're enjoying them on the road or at home. Connor, I know you're a big fireworks fanatic.
That's absolutely true. My last name is Smith, so I was playing with fire as a kid, and I still try to do that whenever possible. So yeah, 4th of July is a good time of year for me. And my favorite fireworks that I always try to get, because we're in Pennsylvania here, it's hard to find cool stuff most of the time. Like, we just have all the stupid little fountains and, the tanks that you can put on the ground. And
firecrackers.
Yeah, I mean, not even most of the time. I personally really like Roman candles. Those are super fun, really dangerous. But that is my pick. That's my firework pick. Really what makes a good holiday for me is just being able to shoot some sparks into the sky with friends and family. Really nothing better than that.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, we do want you to be careful when you're hauling fireworks. There are different regulations in certain states, so make sure you're kind of up to date, whether you're hauling them across state lines, whether it's for a company or for personal use. There are definitely laws that can get you in trouble if you are bringing illegal fireworks into specific states, so make sure to kind of keep up to date on that. But
that said, if you are doing that, hit me up on Facebook and I will pay you for some good... No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, Troy, so what is your favorite aspect or thing you would want to really make your 4th of July a great holiday?
I definitely like the food, and I know truckers might struggle, especially if you're hauling on the road, to kind of have the proper 4th of July dinner. But there are a few handheld items that I think are great for on the road snacking. Burgers and hot dogs are always a must, and throw some ketchup and relish and whatever other condiments you want on there. And I think it's an easy on-the-road snack, whether you're stopped or on the road. It's a one-hander. It's not too messy, so having some burgers and hot dogs while you're on the road is a great way to celebrate 4th of July. And and you need some side dishes to go along with some burgers and hot dogs. So things like deviled eggs or even potato salad or macaroni salad are great 4th of July foods to enjoy. And we wouldn't recommend that you eat these while you're on the road, but maybe if you can make a quick pit stop to relax and have yourself a little 4th of July picnic if you can't make it home.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think those are really like Pennsylvania Dutch items too. That's stuff that we're personally really like just because it's what we've grown up with around here in Lancaster County. But it's also important, when you're on the road and you're trying to eat well, to stay healthy and to pick, reasonable choices like fruit. If you can, it's going to be in season in the summer. anything like strawberries or melon. Good way to stay hydrated and stay energetic while you're driving as well.
For sure.
And yeah, if you want more health tips and tricks to eat healthy on the road, check out our last episode, episode 4. It's called the Mind and Body Roadmap, and we cover lots of different things from exercise to sleeping habits to diet, so be sure to check that out. But that's all we have for you today. So thank you all again for joining us for the 5th episode of Big Rig Banter. I'm your co-host, Connor Smith.
And I'm Troy Diffenderfer.
And next episode, we're going to be talking about the latest and greatest technology coming to you truckers on the road and off the road. So stay tuned for that, but we'll see you next time on Big Rig Banter.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Big Rig Banter. For your next job, check out AllTruckJobs.com, the premier online source for finding the best driver jobs in the country. Browse hundreds of positions by freight or driver type to get back on the road with confidence. Click subscribe to keep the conversations coming. Until next time on Big Rig Banter.